Yep, it's finally that time. We are in the home stretch of Super Saiyan-Tember 2, because all we have left now are the sagas, starting with the OG original Dragon Ball. So, let's dive in. What's up with having going on today? Welcome back to the next season of the mission going to Super Saiyans to fight for the fate of the Earth. And welcome to way before Super Saiyans were even a thing. Welcome way back to the Emperor Pilaf saga of the OG original Dragon Ball, which I know many of you have probably not watched nearly as much as Z, considering the fact that this was nowhere near the popularity level of Z. So, it's more in the cult classic kind of area. So how these reviews are going to work is actually pretty simple. I have written reviews for all of them on my Facebook, and the ones that I don't, I'm going to start working on as soon as I'm done making all these videos for today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal thoughts about each saga, try and be as spoiler-free as possible, even though I will talk about a few scenes here and there if they're important enough to mention. And then I will go to my written review, read that off, and then I'll give you guys my final verdict. So this one's going to be a bit less analytical than the movies, and that's because the summaries are going to be way too long for me to even try to read into one video. So, because of that, I'm going to try to do this a bit more streamlined, a little less spoiler heavy, and only talk about a few scenes that I think deserve to be talked about. So, but for this one specifically, because I also have a story in front of this one on my written review, pretty much explaining how I got into Dragon Ball in the first place. Instead, I'm just going to read off this written review for today, and then I'll give you guys my final verdict, and then I'll see you guys next time for the next saga, which is the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai, or World Martial Arts Tournament if you're watching the English dubs. So, without further ado, here's my written review. Hope you guys enjoy. Well, the time has finally come. After almost 10 years, I'm finally going to be discussing and analyzing my all-time favorite franchise in all of fiction, Dragon Ball. I was initially introduced to this series like most, watching the reruns of the original Funimation dubbed DBZ on Toonami, as well as the original uncut version of the film Return of Cooler, thanks to my neighbors at the time. You guys want more about that story? Go watch my Return of Cooler review. However, due to my obsession with Nickelodeon and Jetix at the time, I never saw the entire series. Instead, I saw scattered episodes here and there thanks to my older brother watching it, and me deciding to join in every now and then. I was much more a Nickelodeon kid, and this did not air on Nickelodeon initially. So because of that, I didn't really watch it much, unless it was on and my brother was watching it, so... yeah. It's a lot like how my Sonic fandom started. I started out with a little impression from playing Sonic 3 on my Xbox, and then Sonic X got me into the actual franchise itself and the characters and yada yada yada. That is until around 2010 when I got hooked into the series for life, thanks to Dragon Ball Z Kai airing on the Nicktoons channel. Because, like I said, huge Nickelodeon kid. If you saw my SpongeBob reviews, you should already know that. Not to mention Danny Phantom in February. I mean, 2 Nickelodeon series in 1 year. Do the math. Watching the Saiyan saga all the way up to the end of the Cell saga for the very first time. Sure, it was pretty heavily censored at first. They got a little more lenient with that as the series went on. But most of it has been fixed in the DVD releases since, and I still adore it regardless. The action, the characters, the story, I loved it all. However, around 2012, I ended up falling out of it again, moving back over to the main Nickelodeon channel to watch SpongeBob and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012. You guys want my thoughts on TMNT 2012? Go watch my review. Then in 2014, I became a fan for life and rediscovered my adoration for the series, which has not yet faded and will probably never fade again, thanks to the big franchise's modern comeback with the movie known as Battle of Gods. Even having never seen the Boo saga up to that point, because DBZ Kai did not make the Boo saga until later on, because Kai was initially cancelled after the end of the Cell saga. And being a bit lost story-wise as a result of that, I loved the movie and watched it so many times. Afterwards, I decided to do a deep dive binge of everything from the franchise, including first-time watches of the original Dragon Ball, the classic Funimation dub of Z from start to finish, including experiencing the Buu Saga for the very first time, every single previous movie and special from Dead Zone to Wrath of the Dragon, yes, including suffering through the god-awful Dragon Ball Evolution, and suffering through the mess that was Dragon Ball GT, rewatching DBZ Kai in its entirety, initially discovering the absolute gem that is Dragon Ball Z Abridged, and playing every single Dragon Ball video game released in North America or playable via emulation. Heck, the first thing I've ever bought with my own money was the first Xenoverse for PlayStation 3, and both myself and my brother played it almost non-stop for 2 whole years. Yeah, when my brother and I first got Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1 for the PlayStation 3, him and I were absolutely hooked on it. We played it all the time, we each had our own custom characters, we each went different ways with our move sets and everything. It was a lot of fun. Point is, Xenoverse is very close to my heart because it played a pivotal part in increasing my love for the series. By the time Resurrection F came around in 2015, I was completely hooked on the franchise, and this time it was for good and guaranteed to never fade away. Heck, as soon as DBS Broly came out, I hunted down an original work print of the Japanese version and watched it before the English dub followed a year later in January of 2019, because I was so excited about it and my patience was very small. I just wanted to see it as fast as possible, especially when I found out that Gogeta was involved. As soon as I got a YouTube channel, I knew I had to find some kind of excuse to share my passion for the series with others around me, and last September I attempted to do just that. Well, 2 years ago more specifically, but you get my point. 2 years ago, I attempted to do just that, but unfortunately life got in the way and I was only able to put out one review of Dead Zone and a tier list of all the other movies. This September, however, I'm going all out and finishing what I started, reviewing the rest of the films, which we already did, the original Dragon Ball, which we're starting today, all the sagas of Z, and finishing off with a deep dive of the 3 completely original arcs of Dragon Ball Super, because like I said, I am not suffering through the awful movie recap arcs. Just no. I have to draw the line somewhere. However, in order to accomplish all this, I need to have it all fresh in my head, so I'm starting off by rewatching all of it and putting out these written reviews early so I don't lose track of anything. And yet I'm already falling behind, but whatever. Anywhooser, with all that preamble done, it's finally time to begin, starting with the first saga of the original Dragon Ball, the Emperor Pilaf Saga. Lasting from episodes 1 to 13, this saga is the introduction to many of the mainstay characters of the franchise. The kind-hearted, monkey-tailed young boy known as Goku, the determined Bulma, the sneaky shape-shifting Peg Oolong, the wise Master Roshi and his friend Turtle, the cunning Yamcha and his furry little cat friend Puar, and the tough Ox King and his daughter, Goku's future wife Chi-Chi, are all introduced in this saga. Through only 13 episodes. That's impressive. Taking only about 4 hours to watch from start to finish, making it a pretty solid entry point for the newcomers and adding to its rewatch value, especially after seeing how the story evolves later on. Especially compared to the fact that it lasts way more episodes from every other saga from here on out. With the exception of DBZ Kai, which is able to actually shorten these to almost match that same length. The story is also quite simple. A young girl and a mysterious little monkey-tailed boy from the wilderness go on a hunt for mystical wish-granting orbs to fulfill their, as in Bulma's, desires, while also coming across both friends and foes on their travels. However, being simple isn't a bad thing, as it does allow for many different unique possibilities, and as long as the writing is good, then it can be entertaining. Thankfully, the writing here is actually very good, full of solid dialogue and understandable attributes that make each character likable in their own distinct ways, while also having actual character, complexity, and unique, distinct personalities. The world building is really good here too, making each location and their interconnectivity with one another add more intrigue to the overall world. This is also helped by the excellent art style of the animation, making it feel somewhat grounded yet also cartoony and fascinatingly outlandish, which as a result gives it so much unique personality and life compared to other anime, both of the time and even now. The characters are outstanding, Goku himself of course being the standout with his wide-eyed innocence, hilarious obliviousness, impressive martial arts skills, lovable pure of heart, mysterious origin that won't actually be fully revealed until Z, infectious, optimistic personality, and his never-ending desire to help others and eat a bunch of food. Yes, his obliviousness can land him into trouble, especially around girls, and he can be a little gullible at times. But even despite that, he's still a great character, and it's no wonder why he became the face of the entire franchise. That's not to discredit the others, though. Bulma, Oolong, Roshi, Turtle, Yamcha, Ox King, Chi-Chi, and Puar all have a unique quirkiness to them that also make them quite likable, but by no means makes them impervious to flaws either. Bulma is selfish, Oolong and Roshi are perverted. It's an anime, you gotta have at least one of them. Ox King is a big softy, Yamcha is thieverous, Puar is overly worried, so forth and so on. But in this case, though, the flaws actually add more complexity and personality to each of them, helping them stand out instead of just being different versions of the same basic character archetype. Heck, even the villains are impossible to dislike because they share that same quirkiness and just how over the top they are. But the real star of this first arc is without a doubt its comedy, as even by today's standards, it's surprisingly very hilarious. Yes, some jokes are low-hanging fruit and a lot of them are pretty adult, but it doesn't go into the straight, raunchy, disgusting territory of most adult cartoons. I'm looking at you, Family Guy. Many of the jokes are sharp-witted, clever wordplay, or just outright random things that happen out of nowhere. And the one-liners are ridiculously good, many being pretty memorable moments of the overall series. Akira Toriyama made this series initially as a follow-up to the successful Dr. Slump, and judging from the comedy, it nailed that same gag-driven style very well. This is also helped by an amazing voice cast. Tiffany Vollmer, Stephanie Nadolny, Brad Jackson, Monica Antonelli, Laura Bailey, Julie Franklin, Chuck Huber, and Chris Kaysen all do a spectacular job with the voice acting, and truly bring all of these great characters to life with their performances. The pacing is also really good too, and eases the viewer into the story instead of just rushing everything. The 22-minute long runtime per episode is utilized well, it's full of iconic moments, some great twists, I could pretty much go on and on. My only real gripes with it are its slow burn style of storytelling, which is by no means bad, but does make the story progress very slowly. Lack of action, especially in comparison to the rest of the series, because, this would become a more action-centered franchise, but on this first arc, it was still trying to find its footing, and thus it was more comedy-based than action-based. That might also be why it struggled to, maintain to get an audience at first glance, when it first came out. A few overdone jokes, one filler episode is just way too bizarre even for this show. Yeah, I'm talking, you know which one I'm talking about, Monster Carrot. That whole episode is filler, barely does anything, and it's extremely just weird. And an ending that, while funny, is also pretty anticlimactic. Overall, though, the Pilaf Saga is a solid starting arc for the series. Sure, it's pretty middle of the road compared to the rest of the series, and does lack the earth-shattering stakes of the other arcs, but it's made up for in its strong comedy and high rewatchability. And on its own, it's just really good. My final verdict for the Pilaf Saga is going to be a solid 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. It's a very entertaining watch, and I definitely recommend it. Just don't expect it to be a masterpiece. It's a very solid start on its own, and it's really good on its own. But it doesn't hold a candle to the rest of the sagas. Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. It's a solid start to a very good series that sadly was just not very well appreciated back then, until it started putting more emphasis on the action rather than comedy gags. But even with that said, this is still a really good starting point for the franchise. It's a good little way to ease newcomers in. Like I said, it's only going to take you about 4 hours to get through this entire saga, making it one of the shortest and easiest to watch in the franchise. And, well, it's where it all started. Without this, we wouldn't have any of the Dragon Ball stuff we have today. We wouldn't have Super Saiyan, we wouldn't have freaking Ultra Instinct, we wouldn't have any of that if it weren't for this one arc starting everything off. It's wholesome, it's lighthearted, it's funny, it's goofy, it's Dragon Ball. What more is there to say? Well, I think that's about it. I guess the only thing I can really talk about now is some select moments that maybe stood out to me a little bit. I'll pick 5. Let's see. Okay, first one I gotta talk about is when Bulma tries to persuade Goku and it miserably fails. And the line that Goku says when it happens, "What do I care about seeing your dirty old fanny?" That's too funny. And then after that, number 2... this one. This is how Goku gets the flying Nimbus from Roshi as a thank you for helping Turtle back to the sea. Which, you know, it's nice. And it's also the origin of how Goku got his flying Nimbus. However, for some reason, they don't explain how he got the power pole. Bit weird. I guess it's just always there with him. Bulma's told by Goku about her underwear being removed earlier when she had to flash Roshi. And as a result, out of embarrassment, Bulma shoots him. Goku pats another girl's lower region, and Bulma thwacks him in the head as a result. Yeah, Goku had a real problem with that when he first started out as a young kid, not knowing who's a girl and who's a boy until he gives a little pat. I'm sorry, it's so hard to explain it without being demonetized. Like, this show can be very adult. What's another really good one? The fight with Yamcha is pretty good. I do enjoy that. And then, where's the other one? Aha, right here. The first Kamehameha. This is one moment we definitely gotta talk about. This is when Goku and his friends were getting Master Roshi to help Ox King get rid of the fire that's surrounding his castle. So what does Roshi do? He goes into his buff form and he pulls out the series' first ever Kamehameha. And then Goku's able to do it immediately afterwards just by watching him, giving a hint to his latent potential hidden deep within. And then, of course, after that, we gotta talk about the other big one, where Goku turns into a giant ape. A great ape. Or, if you watch the Japanese version, an Ozaru. That's a pretty good moment, too. So, yeah. That's pretty much all my thoughts on the Emperor Pilaf saga without going too much into spoilers. Definitely check it out. If you haven't watched it yet, give it a watch. It's only 13 episodes. It's only going to take 4 hours. So it's not that bad. Not that hard to sit through. It's as long as Zack Snyder's Justice League. If you can sit through that, you can sit through this. I don't want to hear complaints about the runtime. So, yep, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time for the 21st Tenkaichi Budokai.